Welcome back to Face the Nation, and joining us now on my right, Romney campaign advisor Bay Buchanan. Bay, good to have you. Republican pollster Frank Luntz, plus CBS political director John Dickerson. Then over on the left, where they're very comfortable, David Corn, who writes for Mother Jones, is the author of a new ebook out this week called 47%, uncovering the Romney video that rocked the 2012 election. David, of course, is the one who broke that story. And also with us today, Katrina vanden Heuvel of The Nation magazine. I want to talk about this Libya thing and see what you all think is the political impact of that in a minute. But Frank Luntz is here, and you did some very interesting research on the vice presidential debate. Bring us up to speed on what that was.
We've now done 3 sessions, and they all concluded the same thing, that Joe Biden did well on the substance, but they were so angry with his style. And the more that you split screen the two of them, where they could see Biden's interruptions and the smiling and the laughing. It's funny because I actually wrote down on my notes here, don't interrupt and don't smile. They didn't want that from the vice president, and he could have gained points, but not a single person in any session switched. In the previous debate, we had about a third of our group switched.
Now, when you say your sessions, what were these focus groups? What exactly was this? How are you measuring this?
We take undecided voters in a number of different cities in the key swing states, about 30 people, and they react second by second using dials. And in almost every issue, Biden's dial score did better than Paul Ryan's. And yet, when you started the discussion, the first thing they said is, why was he interrupting? Why was he seeming to go overboard? He was passionate, but he went too far.
At the risk of interrupting, you know, what strikes me about this with Romney, for example, is we're not about to pick the head of a yacht club. We're electing a president, right? So in terms of substance, you have a presidential candidate who has a secret plan. He's going to cut taxes 20% across the board, $5 trillion, but won't tell us how he'll pay for it. To me, this is insulting to the American people, and this is not, in my mind, a theater performance, Bob. I mean, we are sitting here, we're going to talk polls and strategy and debate performance, but this isn't show business. This is about leadership and who will lead this country in the next century.
Allow me one point on this, though, which is that if you can't cooperate in a debate setting with your opponent, how can you cooperate with Congress? How can you work with the other side? And that's what they pointed out. It wasn't his performance that bothered them. They feel that Barack Obama can't work with Congress, and so if you vote for him again, you're going to get 4 more years of the same thing.
You did some independent survey after the Biden-Ryan debate, and one of the things you found was that people liked what Ryan said about the ability of Romney to work with the Democratic legislature in Massachusetts.
Correct.
Well, kudos to the 87% of the Democrats in that state legislature who were willing to work with an opponent in service of a country and a state, which we haven't seen from the Republicans, who have been so obstructionist these last few years.
You know, basically what we learned from the first debate, and I think the second debate just is going to reinforce that message, is we learned that there's a huge soft underbelly of any kind of support for Barack Obama, that we could take a woman's gap, the ladies' gap of 18 points and close it in 90 minutes, close it into move to 12-point swing. So it tells me Americans are looking for something. They are now decided that if there is something better, they're going to go there. And they saw Mitt Romney, and they saw somebody who was a serious, thoughtful, very, very well prepared, knowledgeable, somebody who can lead and has a plan. And he set it all out there, and the people responded. And where I think Biden made his mistake is they may have said, okay, he's knowledgeable, but what did Ryan say? Ryan said, I am another thoughtful, very, very knowledgeable, and someone determined to turn things around. And he sent that same message of leadership that can make a difference in this country.
The Romney-Ryan ticket has a built-in advantage. The economy is not going as well as anybody wants, and they still have been struggling for months and months. They've put things on their website, they've put out position papers, but one reason I think Romney did so well in the first debate was he ran away from almost any specific that he himself has put out. He won't talk, as Katrina mentioned, about how you really do this tax plan. When he does a foreign policy speech, all he says is, I'll be tougher than Barack Obama, without saying any way in which he will, and actually endorses most of Barack Obama's foreign policy. So what we're getting a lot from your campaign, and you guys are really good at this, and I don't work for a campaign, so it's not kind of an even fight here, but from your campaign, a lot of great, what I call top-line rhetoric. I'm strong, he's weak, I can make the economy better, he can't, without either filling in the specifics
David,
or running. Specifics
are
matter.
there.
They're all
They are there.
Go back
How
to
do
the
you
one
create
big.
jobs?
Go back to the one big issue, the big tax cut plan. He will not say how they'll pay for it. In fact, they say over and over again, we don't want to give that away yet. It's like Nixon. It's like Nixon. You remember Nixon's secret plan?
Tricky Dick Romney.
You remember Nixon's secret plan to end the Vietnam War?
Yeah.
It didn't exist. He just said he had one, and we see the same thing. You guys are so smart. If Paul Ryan is such a smart guy, he should be able to explain this.
We do know one thing, that Barack Obama has no defense of his record and no plan whatsoever for the future.
We don't
and
know that.
then his is hiding.
He may not like it.
No,
He's put
that is not true. But Mitt Romney has laid it all out there.
Okay.
He said it's the loopholes. He's given different ideas of the different possibilities. And he said he's going to work with Democrats to come up with the answers. Right. But the bottom line, just as in Massachusetts, he is going to put this country in a balanced budget, and he's going to be a neutral.
I'm going to ring the bell here,
Right,
go back to your corners, and I'm going to go to referee John Dickerson here. John,
the voice of reason.
Context. What was happening into this debate, this vice presidential debate, when we got there? Democrats were feeling dispirited. They wanted to see the kind of passion from Joe Biden and that we're seeing from David Corn about these issues, because they feel like they're getting mugged by the Romney campaign. So the response was from Biden to mug to the camera, because they want to send kind of this message of, can you believe this guy, at least to reset the Democratic Party. Now, what about the swing voters? I think they're going to make the decision on the top of the ticket, which leaves a huge question for what's the president going to do. Is he going to take this behavior of Biden's and put some reasoning behind it? Is he going to say, well, he's my kind of spouse who's a little overheated, but here's the actual reasoning behind it? And that's the job for the president. Otherwise, you just have this unfocused kind of sputtering, and that's not going to work.
Let me just ask John one more question here. There's no question, and the polls reflect that Romney helped himself in his debate. You heard what Frank Luntz just said about that kind of instant poll that he ran, but are you seeing any polling yet that suggests that the vice presidential debate made any difference in the race? Not on who won or lost, but in the race?
Not really. I think we see, the race overall now in the national polls, you see the average of them, Romney's up by a point or two. He was behind by 3 points or so before that Denver debate. Now in the battleground states, some have turned. Colorado, Florida is looking better. Ohio's a little tighter. The president's still up there. But that's all because of Denver. I don't think we've seen anything in this. The debate feels like it went into the automatic sorting machine of this election that we've already had, where the right took from it what they wanted, the left took what they wanted. Swing voters may have been a little offended, actually, by Biden, but they're not going to make their decision based on
All right, I'm going to ring the bell for round two. Back to
You know what I'd like to hear? I mean, Bay brought up women and the gender gap, which I think is going to be critical to the outcome of this election. And what I'd like to hear in the next debate, we haven't heard it from the presidential or vice presidential debate so far, is women in the context of economic security and their health. Take a page from the playbook of Elizabeth Warren, who has made that link, and President Obama needs to speak to how Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, Obamacare work for women. Work for women to control their economic security and destiny in a very volatile, difficult economy. And I hope we hear from that, because we haven't heard from women's voices. And I think in the shrinking democracy we live in, meaning we only have 9 swing states, and in each of those swing states, how many are we competing for as voters? I think you need to speak to those women, particularly the non-college educated white women who are going to be key in Ohio and those key states.
To that point, I think that's where the vice president really hurt his ticket, is because as women looked at that debate, there's nothing that is more offensive to us than to see a man just constantly interrupt and be offensive and boorish in his behavior and have no respect for somebody who's trying to have a legitimate debate. I haven't talked to a woman who has looked at that debate and not just responded and said that was just awful, obnoxious. And so, when you say, I don't know who won or lost.
I didn't have that reaction. Including my mom, so let's not be over the top. You're drawing out what you want to draw out.
I've talked to a lot of women who are apolitical, who have just made that same. You can, I just know that women do not like that. But to the second point, I agree that the debate itself, whoever won or lost that, is not going to change the vote. But what remains in their mind is who is the serious ticket here? Who are the 2 candidates that are really going to address the issues? And I think the 2 debates have shown, without question, it's Romney and Ryan.
Well,
Frank, let's let Frank talk.
You've got this ideological chasm right here at this table. And that's not what these last 4 or 5% want.
Right.
And they actually don't want the yelling back and forth, with all due respect to all of us here, that they're not voting based on philosophy, because if they were, they would have made up their minds already. The two of them don't agree on much. They're voting on character. They're voting on which person they think understands them and feels for them. And I'll show you. Barack Obama understands and empathizes, but he can't solve their problems. Mitt Romney, they perceive, can solve their problems, but they're not yet convinced whether he understands them. If Romney can prove empathy, he wins. If Obama can prove problem solving, he wins. The case is actually easier at this point for Romney than it is for Obama.